Hello, tubers. This is Pat Jordan coming to you from the barnyard in Illinois. Connection Machine is one of our top red hens. Her talk with me on thiamine, vitamin B1, that she hosted was posted at the Internet Archive on January 29th, 2023. This is a mirror of her second of what will be many recordings. Feel free to show her some love in the comments for what she is doing. It is our intent to go over the vitamin and minerals used as supplements based on my unique experience and analysis that often opposes what's being promoted in what I call AlterNOTive medicine. After the talk was finalized, we had a phone conversation that sounded like I was on a 1970s telephone line that was really quite quaint. I tried to clean it up with filters so it wasn't so harsh because I wanted to share with you how red hens talk to each other when they're offline. It was really kind of amusing that I said that Connection Machine should record that impromptu conversation, and she said she was recording it, but I was blathering so much that I didn't even hear her. She confirmed again halfway through that she was recording, but I was blathering so much that I didn't even hear her. At the end, she stated, like she was talking to an idiot child, that just got off the short bus, that she had recorded it, and I was like totally pleased because I thought that the brief moment of clarity would have had to have been repeated by memory alone on a future show. At the beginning of that private conversation, I had mentioned that I looked in my chapters on vitamins in my books. The material in Operator's Manual for the Human Body that featured B1 had 100-point font that said that B1 dispels fear. About the time that she was starting to record, I was saying that the fact that gurus and the health information that's trending right now is talking about B1 deficiency and that it's widespread. But I had the revelation that maybe it was induced on purpose because the past 3 years have been nothing but a study in fear. So right before Connection Machine pressed the button to record, I was saying, and this is why it was garbled, that it's now my personal view that the B1 deficiency, in quotes, this epidemic of beriberi was engineered. Folks that are aware of what is trending should be able to see by surfing my video channel that I presaged most trends by years before they happen, merely by doing meta-analysis and practicing my twist on the phrase, what would Satan do? Once you can think like the predator that is hunting you, then you can predict its actions with the goal of then hunting the hunter. You can see from my channel's video history that I was calling it a frank beriberi epidemic 2 years ago in my video spelled B-E-R-R-Y, B-E-R-R-Y. When you consider the 3 steps ahead chess playing of the military using full spectrum warfare, then you realize that this is purposeful thiamine depletion that leads to an overt fear. And it was planned and executed long before the end game that you are suffering now. That I miss putting that in this barnyard talk, this Connection Machine production, that was centered solely on B1. highlights my chronic lack of sleep and the fact that you can't hold 17 books of facts in your active memory at one time, which would be a great opening to suggest that people buy my books. But that's just shameless merchandising. So I wouldn't even suggest that I culled some of the great stuff from Operator's Manual, Same Pig, Different Lipstick, and Continuum that we will reference throughout this series of talks.
Engineered this entire damn thing.
Meaning the fear and deficiency in B1?
Yeah. Because, when I put my book together, I was at the U of I. We should be recording this, but
I just did
it at some time. When I was at the U of I was in the biology department, and they got their own library. And you get into the stacks, and there's an entire section of nothing but advances in cancer, and they're bound journals of, you go through like 1934, and you go down the road and it's like 1948, and they're the bound journals for advances in cancer, advances in nutrition, advances in virology. And when I was going through the books for like 1930s for advances in nutrition, everything that anybody has ever said about vitamins since the 1930s was already in those books. And you listen to like Andrew Weil, and he'll get on PBS and he'll tell you everything you want to know about vitamins. And I'm sitting there watching this stuff like 20 years ago going, that's from the 1930s. Nothing has changed. There has been no new information added, even though, we need special B12 just to live. But Andrew Weil is on the circuit and everybody adores him, and he's a gatekeeper telling you what you could have learned in any book in the 1930s.
The question is, how are we going to access those books, and are those books available, and if they are, which kind of archive?
Listen to what I'm saying. It's like, what I'm saying is, listen to what I'm saying. Nothing has changed. And so what I'm saying is everybody's been saying the same party line with no useful new additions since 1930. And we're living in a different world. And so they're talking about things, the way that the human body worked and the way they understood the chemistry all the way back to 1930, and it doesn't apply anymore.
So what has changed? Poison
it has drastically changed, yet they're just saying the same thing. What is 1930s till now? So we're in, that'd be 90 years. Mm-hmm. Nothing's changed in their rhetoric for 90 years.
Fascinating.
Yeah, we need to, make sure you prompt me to say something like that, because it was really upsetting. I was watching that PBS thing, and it's like this guy, and he's got the duper's grin. I learned that phrase. People that are like shining yon, they have a grin on their face, and it's like he's just grinning from ear to ear, and people think, oh, he's such a lovely man, and look at what we learned, and it's like, learned? I knew that in the 1970s. What the hell are you people talking about?
Well, they have to make...
And by then, wait, sorry, because I'm in my manic phase. In the 1970s, the information was already 40 years old.
Now, question is, well, this is what we know about information coming from the U.S. You can only wonder what other information might have been in the other countries and may have been suppressed once the, the medical establishment was, I don't know if it was declared, but America was as the pinnacle of medical advancement. But then again, you have Second World War, and you have German doctors who have been experimenting, and they have, quasi-kidnapped German doctors, brought them to the U.S. and started to work on different projects.
Yeah.
We can only imagine what they were working on back then.
So what I've noticed over the years is some of the more important papers that I've looked at produced in Iran, in Brazil, in Japan, anywhere in the United States. I saw one, I think it was in the United States, it was on garlic.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a bunch of like international names on it, but they were in like an American institution.
Okay.
So they were foreigners, but they were practicing in an American institution. They wrote a paper on garlic, and they said, we wanted to examine the bioavailability of all these urban legends of you must crush garlic 10 minutes before you use it to let the enzymes work, or it's useless. Or you must do this with garlic, and stand on one leg under a full moon and recite this, and then and only then the garlic will work. And so they literally did the rigorous science to do every like folk thing that you could do to garlic, and they measured the availability of all the components in the garlic. And at the very end of the paper, they said, just eat garlic. It doesn't matter what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's science, girl. I mean, that's rigor. But see, these people were foreign. They were in the United States, but they were foreign people, and they did actual science.
Mm. And by the way, I have recorded this.
Oh, you have? Oh, that's excellent.
Not from the very beginning, but we have maybe 6 minutes recording of it. So
yeah. And listen, unless I do this, hey, this is private. Any conversation that we do, just record it, and you want to put it public, just make sure that I haven't used any names that would compromise anybody, and haven't said anything inflammatory, and go ahead and use it.
I have pressed the button literally right before you said this should be recorded, or right after you said that this should be recorded, because I was reaching up for the other phone to record this conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. We're like connected at the head. It's like we got Google Brain or whatever that is.
Okay. All right. So yes, you can post it and do whatever, and I will try to update and edit the disclaimer.
Yeah.
That we are not a medical professionals and this is not medical advice.
Yeah.
All right. And
awesome.
I should be able to quickly download and send this to you in private, this particular conversation. So I'll do that.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. That's
okay.
awesome.
Bye.
Okay. See ya.
Welcome to Connection Machine. We have another episode of going over the vitamins. Today is be or not to be. Let's take a test to find out. And we have on the other line Encyclopedia Patrica Jordanica. So yeah, let's start with bees, and if you can tell us how many B vitamins there are, and we probably will be starting with the B1, and also if there is any test that people can take to find out if they are deficient of it. And yeah, let's start, because I'll keep going with asking questions. So
Sure.
How many B12, how many B vitamins are there?
Well, and I'm at a loss because I didn't turn my other computer on for, before the show. There's quite a number. Everybody knows B12, and beyond that, it goes at least up to B17 that people are aware of, that was renamed Laetrile and amygdalin. Sometimes they will label something a vitamin and give it a number, and then they go, oh, no, that wasn't a vitamin, and they'll erase it from the list. And so you got like a missing tooth there. Sometimes they'll go, oh, well, we named it this, but it is really that. And then, the list will get compressed again. So it goes in and out like an accordion. It really doesn't matter. And I can make this entire talk very simple. We're going to start with B1. And so you're talking about, well, what kind of tests are there? How can we find out whether we need B1? B1 deficiency is beriberi. And the simple part about it is probably everybody on the planet right now has B1 deficiency, which means, again, this is the alternative medicine deflection. Instead of saying you got a frank disease called beriberi, they're saying, oh, it's a vitamin deficiency and we don't know where it comes from. So it's a cover-up. And see, I've got no love loss whatsoever for alternative medicine. I call it AlterNOTive medicine. And I call the people that practice it AlterNuts, because they are crazy. You can't say that there is a particular vitamin deficiency when everybody's suffering from beriberi. Now let's take a look at it. My 1970s publication of Upjohn Pharmaceuticals, their book on vitamins, showed two different kinds of beriberi. You had wet and dry. Wet beriberi is where, of course, I'm doing the YouTube thing. But before we talk about that, let's back up and define what beriberi is. I hate when people do that. Beriberi is like an Indonesian word for I can't. It was also called the weakness. You are so weak that you literally can't stand up. And so beriberi is a form of paralysis. In fact, I think it was in the 1930s when they were using vitamin B1 shots to, and I'm going to say this because this is part of the literature. It's not me making a medical claim. They were curing polio with B1 shots. So it's the weakness. So you got, and it was called flaccid paralysis. And then you got the wet type beriberi where you would be bloated. You would get edema. And that edema, if it caused enough back pressure in the extremities or got around the pericardium, could give you heart problems, could give you heart failure. That was the wet beriberi. And then there was dry beriberi, that its principal manifestations were effects on the nervous system. And then we get into that whole idea of, was it really polio? Or was it a B1 thiamine deficiency? And again, if we say deficiency, we're working for the other side. It's like, well, what caused it to go AWOL?
Mm-hmm. So was the supplementation of the injection of B1 not pharmaceutical but synthetic form, or?
And exactly, because we established in the talk about vitamin A, and we have to outline these core principles every time. And I like when you ask these questions, because this has to be said over and over again to reinforce it. A vitamin does not come from a syringe, and a vitamin does not come from a pill bottle. Those are all synthetic. A vitamin comes from actual food. So we're talking about synthetic analogs. Now, do I take them? Yeah, you know why? Because we have all been severely injured by what they did to us. And so in a sense, we're using synthetic, and I'm going to say it, drugs that are called vitamins to get us to the next stage in health, to where we can use just food, and then food will work for us. Mm-hmm. And so I think, if I remember the newspaper article correctly, they were injecting thiamine mononitrate, which I think could be, I don't have any evidence of it yet, but thiamine mononitrate could lend itself to being, carcinogenic. So I'm completely against the use of that substance, just on the basis of a gut suspicion. Thiamine hydrochloride is where you take an anionic material and you hook it to a cationic material. And if you remember from chemistry, an alkaline or basic substance, when met in the same jar with an acidic substance, forms a salt. And so they precipitate these salts in the form of vitamins, and it would be then called thiamine hydrochloride, because the hydrochloric acid was like the initial reactant with the thiamine. And I take that in like copious amounts. Now, the thing that worked the best, because they have damaged us in so many unique ways, that I'm one of that subsection of the population that has problems phosphorylating things. Now, phosphorus is absolutely essential to the energy economy of the body. Adenosine triphosphate, ATP, is literally, it's our dynamo. It is like glucose. I'm just going to lump them together. Two different chemistries, two different pathways, but like glucose, it's the energy currency of the body. ATP, glucose, and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can't manipulate the phosphorus elements, you're in a world of hurt. So somebody like me, if you looked at the vitamin labels from like the 1930s and 40s all the way till now, they have always been pushing B1 as thiamine mononitrate, thiamine hydrochloride, and if I took it, it might work, but it might not. If it doesn't work, then as I said in the vitamin A talk, it literally builds up as an unmetabolized waste product. But wait, they're a vitamin. No, anything that builds up in your body that can't be shuttled around is waste. You got to think about it as garbage. And so I can't convert vitamin B1 into its active form. Because see, thiamine hydrochloride, yeah, it's okay, and your body can use it if the machinery was in place, but you have to change it to the active form once it gets inside the cells. And if you can't change it, then if it wasn't able to go directly into a process as thiamine, just, because it sheds the hydrochloride, as just thiamine, then you're screwed. And so I'm one of those screwed people, and I have to take a phosphorylated version of B1 that's called thiamine diphosphate, meaning two phosphates.
Mm-hmm.
It's also called thiamine pyrophosphate, which means diphosphate. And it's also called thiamine cocarboxylase. And the ace at the end means that it's an enzyme. These are the active forms. These are the ones that actually do all the work inside the body. Now, if you follow somebody like Elliot Overton, he's the one that got me on the pathway of understanding that B1 is so critical. He claims that, the body has this quirk where if you take thiamine and you take it in and I'm going to say it, reinforcing the three things. The three things are the same thing, same pig, different lipstick. The diphosphate, pyrophosphate, cocarboxylase is the active form. If you take it in the active form, in order to get it into the inside of the cell, the body removes the phosphorus, puts the thiamine inside, and then this is inexplicable to me. Then it has to reattach the phosphate, the phosphate groups. But wait a minute, I just established I have impaired phosphorylation. So how could that ever be and I don't want to use certain words. I almost said, how can that be a useful evolutionary trait? And it's like, well, yeah, evolution is created by mankind. It's not a natural process. How could that ever be a useful trait of a cell for its energy efficient and life-sustaining functions? And my answer is it can't be. It's absolutely absurd. But that's the way it currently works. As we're told by scientists. So thiamine can go directly into the cell, and sometimes it can be used for purposes that don't actually require the phosphate groups to be attached, but for it to be active, to do its main function, the thing that B1 is all about, you've got to attach those phosphate groups. So I only learned when I was looking at Elliot Overton's work that, and I never knew this for like decades, that there was an active form of B1 because they will promote things like phosphorylated B6. If you've ever heard of P5P,
Yes.
that's pyridoxal 5-phosphate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the active form of B6 because B6 typically is marketed as pyridoxine hydrochloride. So we're back to the acid salt again of something. The pyridoxine is not a pyridoxal, and the al means aldehyde. Completely different monsters, completely different pathways, completely different usefulness. And I knew that about B6 for the longest time. And then you learn about B2, and so that's riboflavin. And so you got riboflavin as just the substance, but you also have riboflavin 5-phosphate, and that's the active stuff. And I knew about those two, but I had no idea whatsoever that there was an active B1. So I'm studying Overton's work, and what I intended to do, because it was part of his talk, I wanted to gain weight. And so I was taking, well, I knew I had phosphorylation problems. I was taking Swanson's vitamins that was active B1. It was labeled as cocarboxylase. And like I said, those three names, it all means the same thing. And it was like, I'm going to tell you, it was the most perfect formula ever created by man. And you look at the back of the label on the bottle, and it's like almost at its expiration date. And I took it slowly, and see, here's the thing. I hope I'm not talking around in too many circles, because every one of these facts is tied to the next fact. You have to bring yourself up slowly. If everybody has beriberi, there's two ways you can approach it. You can hit it with a massive dose of thiamine and try to shock the enzyme systems into working again. But in many cases, you're overloading the enzyme systems. They can't do anything, and you've already, because you were sick for so long with beriberi, the enzyme pathways have been downregulated by genetic control. And so you can literally just flood your body with thiamine, and it can't work because there's nothing for it to work with. And so I realized of the two different methods that I was going to use the slow and steady method. So I got the active form, and I started out with one pill just to see how I was going to do, capsule. And then I moved to 2 capsules, and then I moved to 3 capsules a day. And then I maybe took 4 capsules a day, but pretty much stayed with 3 capsules a day for a month. And I didn't gain an ounce of weight, nothing.
Now, did you take it at once, or you took it throughout the day?
Yeah, divided doses throughout the day. Okay. So 3 per day, 1 for each meal.
And this was B1 from Swanson carboxylate?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what it does, if you understand what thiamine does, it's a premier assistance for carbohydrate digestion. And because what Elliot had promoted, it's like, maybe I can gain some weight, because my avatar is a stick man, and I really am that skinny. If I turn sideways, I disappear. It's a great magic act.
Thank you.
So I took it for a month, and it's like it didn't do anything except for one thing. For about 20 years, after I'd fallen off a roof doing, I was working on a roofing job, and I slipped off the end of the roof, hit the ground pretty hard. I developed, and I didn't know it at the time, I had to discover this over a period of years. When you have an impact injury to your brain, it can cause what's called cerebral salt wasting syndrome. And so basically you're losing sodium in your urine has absolutely nothing to do with your kidneys. It's brain damage. And I had kind of a clue that something was wrong with me, because if I didn't take like tons and tons of salt, and I'll tell you about the levels of salt in just a minute, especially because I was working construction, I would get the most insane leg cramps that you have ever experienced. And I went from using Hain sea salt, that is actually, it's a lie. I'm just going to say it, the way it is. It's a lie. The FDA allows you to label something sea salt if it originated from sea salt, because there's different kinds. You can get it from the sea, or you can mine it out of the ground. Well, it was sea salt. But if you read the Hain label, it's at least 98.9% sodium. Well, that's not sea salt. And so I realized that the more salt I was eating in this condition, the worse my legs were getting, because I was suffering from sodium
deficiency,
poisoning and no electrolyte replacement. So then that's when I discovered real salt. So that's Redmond Mills. I think they're out in Utah. And of course, when you use a gram of their salt, half of that is sodium, the other half is potassium, and the other remaining half is all these trace minerals. And so when they say, oh, you got to limit yourself to so many grams or so many teaspoons or whatever of salt, well, yeah, that would be if it was refined salt, because you're getting a pure sodium hit and it will literally cause you damage. And so I was having these terrible cramps from the cerebral salt wasting syndrome. And I switched to real salt, and within one day the cramps went away, because I still needed the sodium, but I had the balance of sodium and potassium and all the trace minerals. And it was like I was wasting trace minerals in my urine as well. So that's the history, and that went on for 20 years, to the point where on an average day, and we're talking a 12-hour work day, doing heavy labor, I would on average take in anywhere from 40 to 70 grams of salt. Now, hopefully there's some new age alternate gurus out there that just had like a coronary or a cerebral stroke. I said that right, 40 to 70 grams a day, because I was wasting that much salt in my sweat and my urine because my brain was damaged. And we had a couple of the worst droughts in Illinois' history, and I worked through them. We're talking over 110 degree heat index. And on those days, I took in 100 grams of salt.
Wow, that's a lot of salt.
That's a lot of salt, and that's the only thing that would sustain me so that I did not feel ill. And so cerebral salt wasting disease is some pretty serious stuff. And so with that as a background, then imagine my surprise when I'm listening to Overton's work. He's making a good case for what they call B1 deficiency, and I'm following it with the sole idea of gaining weight. That's the only reason I came into, testing this out on myself. After a month, I didn't gain an ounce of weight, but then I realized, wait a minute, I didn't salt my food today. And if you really are, you're almost like surfing your own body. You're riding the wave. You're letting it take you where it needs to be. If you, and I use the word listen, if you listen to your body will tell you what to do. And it was not even a thought in my mind to grab a salt shaker, which I had for 20 years, to put on enormous amounts of salt to where it looked like like pink snow on your food, because real salt has a pink tinge to it.
Correct, yes.
And I was just like so shocked, because it's like, wait, I didn't salt my food. I didn't need to. And then I realized that the B1, because the brain is nervous tissue. And the other thing besides carbohydrate metabolism that B1 helps with is maintenance of nervous tissue. It literally healed my cerebral salt wasting disease when all it's trying to do is not be a skinny stick man.
But that was very interesting because I have opened up the page of the company called Metabolics, which you mentioned that Swanson stopped making their good product B1.
Yeah.
And we were searching for another source, and we found metabolics.com, and there I read, what does vitamin B1 do? Well, it contributes to normal energy yielding metabolism. Thiamine pyrophosphate is required as a coenzyme for a few but important enzymes that enable pyruvate to form acetyl-CoA, which is acetyl-CoA support, and alpha ketoglutarate to form succinyl-CoA products in the cells that make energy from food. This is according to a publication pubs.niaaa.nih.gov and publications. We can put it later on in description. It also contributes to normal functioning of the nervous system. In the brain, thiamine is required by the nerve cells and supporting nervous system cells, or glial cells. It's also needed to create neurotransmitters. It contributes to normal psychological functions. Thiamine pyrophosphate is necessary to create some neurotransmitters, brain chemicals, that are essential for normal psychological function. And it also contributes to the normal function of the heart. Thiamine is found in high concentrations in the heart as well as in the brain, liver, and kidneys. The heart is particularly sensitive to thiamine deficiency, and impairment of the thiamine pyrophosphate dependent enzymes primarily affects the heart and nervous system. So there you go for B1. But you also may have mentioned that there is an active form and inactive form. So why would somebody take, or why would be interested in inactive form if everybody needs an active form of any kind of supplement? Am I correct?
Well, everything you're asking about is correct, and everything you ask about is significant. We have to look at it not in terms of the biology, because according to Elliott, he's got his sales and he wants to sell the bentophamine, which is a how do I want to say this? It's a different form of thiamine that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Mm-hmm. And I think it is more lipophilic, which means more fat-loving, and so it kind of just sluices in to where it wants to be. It bypasses and what I'm saying is it bypasses the normal handling pathway. So thiamine, pyrophosphate, it meets a gatekeeper at the outside of the cell. Mm-hmm. And a gatekeeper says, well, we need the thiamine, but you're going to have to get rid of your luggage. So it sheds the phosphorus, lets the thiamine in, and then says, oh, okay, once you're in the gate, where's your phosphorus? You got to hook that up. And it's like, well, I can't. Well, why not? Because you took away my, my saddle.
Yes.
I can't put the phosphorus anywhere. And so even though we need the active form, the thiamine, pyrophosphate, diphosphate, cocarboxylase, if your body can't change it back to that unique form, you're SOL. Now, for whatever reason, Elliott was under the impression that the body cannot use pyrophosphate in any form and it's complete waste. And of course, he wanted to sell his version of it. But after 1 month, and I will say this, at low dose, it healed a disease that I had for 20 years. The pyrophosphate doesn't have to work inside the cell for certain processes. So it probably went into pathways that allowed me to heal that were not necessarily intracellular. And as you said, if thiamine, it works to help form neurotransmitters and the entire long list of what you're talking about, it did something. That's all I can say about that. With no Mr. Science, whiteboard presentation, it did something, because within a month I lost the disease that I had for 20 years that nobody, including me, could figure out or fix. I finally actually got a name for it after many years, cerebral salt wasting disease, but there's no treatment for it. And I discovered it quite by accident. And so, do we need the active form? Well, yeah, I proved that out on myself. Is it useful for us? Yes, I proved that out on myself. Do we need the inactive form? Well, yeah, because if they're doing this gatekeeper thing and going, lose the phosphorus or we won't let you in the city gates, then taking just thiamine will get it into the cells. And then it would be up to each individual, because I've got a long history of chemical damage in industry at every level. And so I'm the poster child for poison. And so, yeah, my phosphorylation pathways are, they're damaged, but not everybody will be that way. And so hopefully there's a bunch of people out there, they take just thiamine. And for me, I would only take thiamine hydrochloride. I've got a reservation about any claims about stuff that can pass the blood-brain barrier. It's like, well, you know what? If that barrier was there for a reason, do I really want to cross it by using, and let's make no mistake here, anything that you take in pill form or injection, it's synthetic. It's not the real thing. And so I got hesitation taking something like that, but I would then, I would default to what my mother used to call the lesser of two evils. And I do personally take high doses of thiamine hydrochloride. But the other thing that I discovered, and this is all B1 related, when we're doing this one vitamin at a time, it's like, thank goodness, because we're going to do a show on each stinking vitamin. So I worked in the semiconductor industry. And in that industry, you've got the highest of the high tech is called gallium. And that's a metal that is like mercury. It's liquid at room temperature. Gallium arsenide, and of course that's based on arsenic. Gallium arsenide is a semiconductor technology. And so in these fabrication departments, all the time we're being exposed to arsine gas, which of course is a cumulative toxic poison. And so I got so sick that I had to find, how do I recover from this arsenic poisoning? I go to the University of Illinois. I'm walking around, literally getting lost in the senior stacks. They had these circular staircases, and every floor looked like every other floor. And I had McCall letters, written on a piece of paper. I'm going up and down the stacks, and I could not find these books, and I couldn't find my way out. It was like, some kind of sci-fi, spooky movie thing. I finally found the book. I came back downstairs, I'm sitting at the table, and I'm reading about how the Japanese actually cared about their semiconductor workers because they knew that those people were being poisoned by arsenic. And they came up with the solution to give them S as in sulfur, allyl, A-L-L-Y-L, which is it's the bonding form, sulfate. And it's like, okay, where do I get that? Do I have to go get an injection? Do I need pills? And so that's your starting point. You find out industrially, the Japanese look after the workers. In America, they actually hope you die so that you won't, start a lawsuit. I'm looking up S-allyl sulfate, and I found it occurs naturally in garlic.
Oh, get out of here. So all we have to do is just eat tons of garlic and we're off the vampires.
That's exactly it. And, I mean, to the letter.
And so, I'm calling the white coat assassins.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let me stop for a second. You mentioned your deficiency or your symptoms of missing B1. Just to throw it in, the deficiencies that are listed over here in metabolics.com is they say deficiency is rare as food and cereals are fortified, but symptoms of deficiency might include tiredness, confusion, irritability, apathy, decrease in short-term memory, depression, and abdominal discomfort. There is a specific deficiency disorder called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is a neurological disease, disorder, which can occur commonly in malnourished chronic alcoholics, which is a result of thiamine deficiency. The active transport of thiamine in the small intestine is inhibited by alcohol and folic acid deficiency. So this, I'm just going to throw it in just in case anybody listens and it will, ring the bell in their head. Oh, yeah, that's, maybe I should look into it.
Well, okay. See, and this is why I don't want to get caught in the trap of the whole YouTube thing.
Yeah.
Our topic today is B1, but before we talk about that, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe with a sledgehammer and ring the bell with your head. The alcoholism thing, in Chinese medicine, they call it the death spiral. When you start to degrade in your health, it accelerates on a downward helix, which is akin to, how the water swirls down a toilet before it goes into the drain?
Yes.
That's what your health does, and it gets faster the closer you get to the end. Alcoholism, in my mind, and basically I co-wrote a book with Franzetta called Legacy, and it's about hypoglycemia. Drinking alcohol will deplete you of B1. It will lead to things like depression. And so what do? You drink more alcohol.
Yeah.
It will deplete you of B1 and lead you into more depression. This is what the Chinese were calling the death spiral. But why were people depressed in the first place? Why did they seek out because alcohol is a numbing agent. What do they call it? Sedating. I need the other word for it. What is alcohol? You got stimulants and you got depressants. Yeah, it's a depressant substance. And so you were already depressed, and so you grab something to numb the feelings that you already got that were based on, and here's the big one. We're going to have to keep jumping back into my history to answer these points that you bring up. Depression is part of a continuum of anxiety, panic, and depression. And this is all in the book that we wrote called Legacy. And all they are is lack of oxygen to the brain, called hypoxia. And the ancient Chinese would say, if you want to understand what anxiety is, hold your breath. I knew exactly what they meant, because if you do hold your breath, and you got the willpower to do it, you literally get desperate. You feel anxious. You get in a panic. Oh my God, my brain, every cell in my body needs oxygen. I can't breathe. And then you take the big inhale and you sound like a train whistle. That's anxiety. It's hypoxia. And so, and we gotta bring Sandwich Lady into this picture too. She and I worked on the cytomitopathology concept, the theory that I keep citing, that we have been damaged in so many unique ways that everybody has to be looked at as an individual. Not because we're genetically unique, but because we've been damaged genetically in unique ways. And so we're bringing the whole Red Hen family into this discussion. But the cytomitogeno thing will let us know of where that hypoxia comes from, because if it's not mechanical, then it has to be physiological. It's got to be physiochemistry. And of course, B1 is central to what is called pseudohypoxia, which means it's not like somebody pinching your nose and covering your mouth. is that you got the pinched nose and covered mouth over your cells, so to speak. I'm making an analogy here. Your cells can't breathe. And why can't they breathe? Because everybody has beriberi. We're all suffering from B1 deficiency. But when you call it a B1 deficiency, then you're doing a disservice, because you're not saying that there are forces out there that literally destroyed our bodies, and we're starving on the inside for oxygen, and it drives people to alcohol and drugs and right into the open arms of these wampirs that have white coats and want to give you psych drugs that do absolutely nothing for the underlying. And see, I just did a show with Our Lady of Sardinia, and we're talking about how antidepressants lead to superbugs. And she says, what did she say about these drugs? They claim that anti-anxiety and anti-depression drugs are because of an underlying metabolic deficiency in the brain. And then they go on to imply that maybe it's neurotransmitters, and they try to treat you through that pathway. And of course, it doesn't work. We lost Granny Annie and Newshound, two absolutely just phenomenal little red hens, beautiful human beings, and some of the best. I'll say it because it's the way everybody thinks about it. Researchers. Well, and Granny Annie was a researcher. She experimented on herself. So, she was a researcher, and she was a literature review specialist. Because there's a difference between researching, which is a clinical act, and then just reading what other people have done. We lost two of the most beautiful people in the world to Valium. And why? Probably because initially they were in frank beriberi, which means they were in a state of hypoxia. It affected their nervous system. It affected their brain. They go to a doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, you're nervous. Here, take this pill," and it ruined their lives. Granny Annie was on Valium, a form of benzodiazepine, for 40 years. And then Newshound was on Valium for 20 years. If you look at these drugs, it says you should try them for 2 weeks, see what kind of results you get, and then quit. Last time I checked, 40 years and 20 years is not 2 weeks. So these people were literally systemically and purposely poisoned. And it could have, because, I'm making the statement. I'm not going to say, deficiency. We all have beriberi in some form or another. I mean, think about all the people with edema. Think about all the people with the cardiac manifestations. And you brought that out, when you said the signs and symptoms. Effects on the heart when you're low on B1. And heart disease is the number one killer of North Americans. Think about that. Could it be that people just need at least B1, if not the B vitamins, to just like straighten them out? But they're given all these blood pressure medications and water pills and all this other kind of stuff. Water pills. Goodness gracious, didn't I say there's two kinds of beriberi? Wet and dry. And if you got wet beriberi, it has cardiac effects. I mean, everything that you had just brought up was confirmed by what I had said earlier, and we're reinforcing now. Everybody is in a state of frank B1 crisis. I'm not even going to call it deficiency. It's beriberi. Let's see, I wrote it down. The other thing on the list: depression and alcoholism. And it's all okay. I'm going to put pseudo hypoxia. We need to come back to that. And so you were talking about the metabolics, and that's in the UK, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's the only one that we found that was pure, because there's some stuff that you can get in the United States. And Sandwich Lady is another one of our top little red hens. She's the one that I work with to come up with the cytomitogenepathology theory. And she tried a formula of thiamine pyrophosphate that had a bunch of extra ingredients, including peppermint. And see, I've got this criteria for supplements. Absolutely do not take a supplement that has magnesium stearate or any kind of stearate in it. It'll call it stearic acid, whatever. It'll clog up your lymph. And don't take any kind of supplement, especially if you're going to be using homeopathy at any time, with peppermint in it. Coffee, peppermint, camphor, these things are just strictly off the table if you're going to use homeopathy. Peppermint disables homeopathy. And so you got to ask, because, I take supplements like right on the tongue. I always empty capsules. I don't swallow capsules. And some of these vitamins, they're not the most pleasant taste in the world, but it's like, why do you need to flavor it with peppermint? Well, no, let's back up. Why do you need to flavor it with anything is the umbrella question. But then if you were going to flavor it, why would you use peppermint when everybody on the planet knows it disables homeopathy? So the reason why I'm so critical about alternative medicine is they will often, it's like fishing. They got this really nice chunk of whatever on a hook, and they'll bring you in with, hey, look, it's active B1. I'm going to get me some. And by the time you bring the bottle home, it's like, oh, where'd the peppermint come from? So they'll have something in it that either neutralizes its positive effects, or I've seen other formulations where it will actually make you ill. And I'll use the stearates as an example. So you're taking all these health supplements, and at one time, because I had chemical allergy, well, obviously because I worked in all these industries, I was taking 40 supplements a day.
You must have reeked when you went to the bathroom.
And so it's like, think about this. If you're taking 40 supplements a day and they're all loaded with, and I'm going to say it because this is what it is, a saturated fat that is best known in industry to make paint from. You know how you get that really nice, hard, shiny gloss on enamel paint? That's your magnesium, calcium, and I forget the other, stearate. They're metal salts. You take a metal, you mix it with the anionic stearate, and boom, you got. You could put it on a iron skillet, and you'd have like a no stick surface. Do you really want to take 40 supplements a day for years with this lymphatic clogging fat?
You can only imagine. You can only imagine what this will do on your arteries. And where it deposits itself. So speaking of this particular B1 from Metabolics in the UK, you mentioned other ingredients. I'm just looking it up, and it contains cellulose, hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose, which is the capsule, as you mentioned, and thiamine pyrophosphate. So that's it. And it says it's suitable for vegetarians, vegans, no gluten-containing ingredients, and no nut-containing ingredients.
And this is what we look for. And, you really got command of this, the whole kind of interchange that we got going on here, because you're highlighting the very things that I was talking about. We have to look for purity in these substances. And you don't get any more pure than the metabolics, because the one that you could get in the United States had a whole ton of stuff, the peppermint, the stearates, and more junk. Why do you need junk? We needed just that one thing, and they're withholding it from us. And if you put more stuff in it, it might neutralize the effect of it, or it might make you sicker from taking supplements. So how is that ever a benefit? And the answer is, well, it isn't, because the alternative world is there to capture us that escaped from the big net that the allopathic world had set for us.
This reminds me of the search for proper chlorophyll, because you mentioned chlorophyll is made with
Alfalfa.
Alfalfa, and we found one in Canada that is unflavored. It's made of mulberry, but they were unable to sell it to the US. And then I found a company that made mulberry chlorophyll, but it was made with, when I got a bottle, it tasted like peppermint. And they said, yeah, with just a little bit we put in for a flavor. Well, I was looking for a clean product, you know.
And see what they say and what the truth is. Yeah, we put it in there for flavor. But if you know what we know at the level that we know it, I mean, this comes from Sam Hahnemann in the late let's just say 1860s maybe. Yeah. I'm terrible with numbers. Don't ever quote me. And you can fact check me because I'm just going to say I'm wrong. But let's just say Hahnemann said in the 1860s. That's a long time, kids. Avoid the peppermint, man. It's bad if you're going to use any other kind of natural modalities. So you got to ask, yeah, we put it in for flavor. Well, why not something else? Anything but that. But why do you have to flavor chlorophyll? I've drank before I knew that it was like a horrific thing. Alfalfa is good for Arabian horses, not human beings. I've drank the alfalfa chlorophyll before, and it was absolutely disgusting. But at what point do we have to be so catered to by the nanny that the nanny knows better, and here's a spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down? And I'm going to say this because, you know, I know we might be listened to by men, women, and fluids and children and whatever. It's like, just man up and take what you need and stop with your whinging. You know, you don't need a flavoring. Just take it, get it in. And so I was all for the mulberry leaf thing. That made perfect sense. And then they got to screw it up.
Yeah, well, the Hahnemann, the only reference that I have over here, well, not only, one of the references is on June 26, 1812. Hahnemann presented a Latin thesis entitled A Medical Historical Dissertation on Helborism of the Ancients.
Right.
Helborism. So I guess he was starting to delve into homeopathy in around 1812, somewhere around there.
He's an old man.
Yeah, he was born 1755 and he died 1843 at the age of 88.
So 1860s was wrong, but that's a long time for people to know that there's certain things that you must avoid when you're trying to do his modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at alternative medicine and it's like, okay, I'm just a dumb farm boy in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and I know enough to avoid things like that. And then you've got these big companies you tell me, does this seem rational that some company that's trying to break away from allopathy and make nutritional supplements for the rest of the world that, you know, doesn't want to be like extorted by the medical world, do they have the smarts, the knowledge, and the infrastructure capability of knowing that there is an active form of B1, what it is, how to synthesize it, and then get it to market? Or did all this stuff come to that industry through the already established pharmaceutical, what do I want to say, cabal that was operating in the background? Because one of my favorite supplements, I think it's pure encapsulations,
mm-hmm.
was just bought out by a mega corporation.
The same thing with New Chapter. New Chapter used to produce easy to digest, a probiotic. Their products went through fermentation. I sat on several lectures when Herb Lewis came to speak about the products, the co-founder or co-owner of the company. But I think several years ago, New Chapter was purchased by Procter and Gable, or
Oh man, are you
Gamble.
kidding me?
Give me 1 second. It was either JJ Johnson and Johnson or Procter and Gable purchased a new chapter, and we're talking probably back 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I was searching for another company. Another company would be Mega Foods, which has the same philosophy of making vitamins based from plants, herbs, berries, basically food based, organic, non-GMO. That's the key words that you're looking for in supplements. And again, it's also easy to digest. They don't use any fillers. I mean, minimal quote unquote other ingredients.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are running out of the companies, and these mega corporations, they are buying the smaller companies one by one because the little guy has to raise their prices in order to make a buck, and people will do their research and they find a different company, and they go online and they buy through Amazon or some like what is it CVS, for example, brand, the big corporations brand.
Walgreens, yeah.
Yes, which is watered down, more synthetic, not non-GMO, non-organic. And, people buy it because that's what they can afford and makes them feel good mentally. But does it do any good for their body, or even the opposite? Does it harm their bodies because of what's in it?
So can I make a segue back to, and I don't mind talking around in circles because life is a continuum. It is a circle. Let's get back to my arsenic poisoning and the SL sulfate in garlic. And when I learned what the Japanese were doing, while I was still in California, I could not stand the smell of garlic or onions cooking. That alone was mobilizing the arsenic and making me sick. Because arsenic is a cumulative poison that can go throughout your entire body. And I have a philosophy, it's called poison in, poison out. So if it hurts you going in, it's going to hurt coming out. And it took, when I finally came back to Illinois to live, I went back to gardening, and I would grow like hundreds of pounds of onions, and I had enough onions in the crawl space to last a year. I was eating garlic and onions every day, 3 times a day. So for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner, I was eating any way you can. It didn't matter if it was raw or cooked or stir fried or whatever.
You must have been fun to be around.
Well, and when you're dying of industrial poisoning, it's like, I don't care who's around, man. I got to get better. But it took a long time. It's not just like, okay, I went from the not being even able to smell this stuff cooking to slowly introducing it, working my way up, eating it 3 times a day for a year before I had defeated like the bulk of my arsenic poisoning. And so what we're looking at is, if anybody is familiar with like natural gas or liquid propane gas, depending on how your house is heated, they put a dopant in there because these gases, they're odorless. And so you have to put something really nasty in there so that you can smell it. Well, it's a sulfur-based compound called a mercaptan, which means mercury capture, because for the most part, sulfur is a chelating agent that loves to grab onto metals. Now, arsenic is a metalloid, so it's kind of like a neighbor of metals, but it will act as that chelating for things like mercury, arsenic, antimony, your heavy metals. It'll grab on and pull them out. So over a year, 3 times a day, every day, onions and garlic, until what I had grown in the garden was completely used up, and then you go to the store and you buy some more. And so what I did not know then, because you actually have to come into this kind of knowledge slowly, is that the S-allosulfate that I was using for the arsenic detox was I want to use the word an analog of what they were using in autistic kids, because I still had chemical allergy. I was getting over my frank metal poisoning, but I still had like organic chemical, and organic just means carbon based, organic chemical poisoning. And I was looking into what can I use to detox, and this thing called allothiamine came up, and it was used in the DAN protocol, Defeat Autism Now. And what absolutely fascinated me was that autistic kids had nearly the same symptomology that I did as just an adult with industrial chemical poisoning. I found that absolutely fascinating. And so I got some allothiamine, and I took it, and of course, it helped a little, but it took even more years later to realize that, wait a minute, you know what allothiamine is? Allium is the genus of things like onions and garlic.
Yeah.
And the thiamine is thiamine. And so basically it was B1 from garlic. And that's another thing that I find to be like, it's a moral affront for people to sell you something that's been teased out of a food, when if everybody was just eating garlic, then you wouldn't worry about somebody having the bad smell of garlic breath if everybody had the bad smell of garlic breath. And so I went back to eating just garlic. And again, it doesn't matter if it's raw or cooked or whatever. You just eat the stuff because there's B1 in garlic. And that form is allothiamine. Elliot was selling bentophamine. I was using thiamine diphosphate, pyrophosphate, co-carboxylase. And all these things are helpful. And so, can I make recommendations to other people? No, I can't, because I don't know what your history is. I don't know whether you can methylate. I don't know if you can phosphorylate. I don't know what the status of your body is, and therefore you have to do everything on an individual basis. But I will make a blanket statement that I think everybody in the modern world right now is suffering from beriberi.
And we are only at the vitamin B1, and we have how many of them?
Yeah, I don't look at clocks. How long have we been at this? Because there's another huge topic that I want to bring up.
It's going to be almost an hour.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to keep going?
Yep, just keep going.
Okay. So, I take notes. And the other thing that I want to bring up, because you had brought up depression, and that was cited in the, if you don't mind, read the, from Metabolics, read the signs of B1 deficiency, please.
Okay. Tiredness, confusion, irritability, apathy, decrease in short-term memory, depression, and abdominal discomfort. There is a specific deficiency disorder called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is a neurological disorder, which can occur commonly in malnourished chronic alcoholics, which is a result of thiamine deficiency. And the active transport of thiamine in the small intestine is inhibited by alcohol and folic acid deficiency. So that's what was mentioned by Metabolics.
Okay. And I needed to do that because I wanted to make one last Hail Mary pass. And we'll bring this up every time we talk about B vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
And if it comes out of a jar or a needle, it's not a vitamin, it's synthetic.
Yeah.
And so if anybody's heard of the MTHFR gene, it's methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene. It's an enzyme. And all it takes is one thing that I had seen as a direct correlation was Adventis makes a smallpox vaccine that was known to take out that gene. Mm-hmm. So I'm just presuming that anybody that got a smallpox vaccine has that gene injured, or modern vaccines for the most part, because this has happened pretty much just in a younger population. So people that are probably younger than maybe 50 years old are showing this MTHFR thing unless they've gotten modern vaccines. The genetic mutation impairs your ability to metabolize folate. And so their answer, they'll call it a deficiency. Is it a deficiency, or is it, as we derive the cyto, meaning cytosol, that's the jelly inside the cell. Cyto, or cytoplasm. Mito, meaning mitochondria, its functions, including the Krebs cycle, because that's the other thing that you were saying when you're talking about the succinic acid and the alpha-ketobutyric acid. Those are all part of the Krebs cycle. That's the energy metabolism of the cell that occurs in the mitochondria. And so we're back to B1 being essential for just energy production in the mitochondria in the cell. So B1 is absolutely essential. And then geno, so cyto, mito, geno, meaning your nuclear genetics, the nucleus of the cell is in the center. Any kind of those damages will render you either unable to make or unable to process any of the life chemicals that we're talking about. So do people really have a methylene tetrahydrofolate deficiency, or is it just that their genes are so messed up and the receptor sites are so messed up that they can't process it? These are the questions you have to ask. But never mind, it doesn't matter, because Merck, the chemical pharmaceutical giant, is the sole patent holder on the methylene tetrahydrofolate that all, and I'm telling you, even your alternative, like nutraceutical salesmen offer. If you've got an advanced form of folic, and I should say folate, and we'll have to get into that, especially when we get into folic acid. Anybody that uses that is either using the patent or the patented product that probably all comes from one central location out of Merck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's synthetic, and it's held in enemy hands by people that probably broke your gene to begin with. I mean, this is the insidious, just like danger of it all. They broke your gene, and then they wiggle like the palliative at you, because it doesn't fix the gene. It just bypasses that metabolic broken pathway or your inability to manufacture it. It's not a fix. And that's why I said taking these synthetic vitamins gets you to the next level.
Gets you over the hump.
Yeah, it gets you over the hump. And so I wanted to bring that up with the and next time when we do the folate, the folic acid thing, we're going to have to go into depth about that, because I know dirty little secrets on that as well. But what I wanted to get to is, and this is my early history. When I came back home from California, I was like damaged goods. And so I actually went into college and went into pre-med studies. And of course, the college had its own library, and I'm like pouring through all these medical texts and alternative medical texts and trying to find out what the hell is wrong with me. And turns out that I learned about pseudohypoxia from, and I always forget the first guy's name, but there was a book on health and nutrition by Pizzorno, Pizzorno.
And what was the book on?
It's just health and nutrition, I think.
Let me look
and
it up.
What they're talking about is you will have this sense of anxiety, maybe even panic attacks, if you have what's called pseudohypoxia. And it's the inability of converting lactate to pyruvate. Because, see, pyruvate is another one of those chemicals in the Krebs cycle, the carboxylic cycle, that leads to energy production. And so if you're not able to like reform pyruvate, you're going to literally feel completely starved of energy. Oxygen is absolutely the fire that allows you to burn glucose in a cell. So if you think about it like a steam engine, and you know how they have that little door, and you throw in a piece of wood or you throw in a shovel of coal, and you close the door really quick, and it heats up the firebox, and it makes the water in the steam engine, it makes steam, and the steam runs the wheels. The mitochondria are the firebox that require the fuel, which is glucose, and the fire, the analogy being oxygen. Of course, fire uses oxygen to burn, but we're making, we're not making a little fire actually inside of ourselves. It's just an analogy. So those are our two requirements there. But if the pathway, if the turning of that wheel is impaired in any way, and you can't convert lactate back to pyruvate, then you're going to feel this pseudo-hypoxia. And see, I have never in my entire existence ever been subjected to what anybody would classically call depression. I have never in my entire existence ever been subjected to what you would call anxiety or panic. But when I was feeling this oxygen starvation, the classical subjective definitions of what we were just talking about, anxiety, panic, depression, could manifest. And see, Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese general, his maxims were: know yourself, know your enemy, and expect the unexpected. Well, I knew myself, and I'm the kind of bulldog that actually runs towards a fight instead of runs away. So it's like, why am I feeling this? Because this is not me. It's never been me my entire life. I knew myself, knew my enemy. Well, guess what? I was exposed to some pretty powerful chemicals that were central nervous system depressants. And then expect the unexpected. Well, if I'm not really a head job, and I don't need to see a psychiatrist, and I don't need psych drugs that are actually poisons, then what the hell is going on? And that's when I discovered this pseudo-hypoxia relationship. And it's like, okay, all of the chemicals that I've been exposed to throughout my entire work history have so depressed my ability to literally breathe at the cellular level. I'm messed up. Now what do I do? And I'm going to tell you, that question remained open for probably another 20 years until I saw Elliot Overton's stuff on how, basically everybody has, and I'm going to call Barry, but he was calling it B1 deficiency. Because if you look at B1, guess what it does? It works at the mitochondrial level. It works at the carbohydrate metabolism level. It will reverse the pseudo-hypoxia. Mm-hmm. And that was part of his presentation. And that's why, when things resonate with you, when you've been struggling for over 40 years to correct your health, and one guy says one thing and you go, oh my God, I know exactly what he's talking about, then you immediately accord them, they know what they're talking about.
So you're talking about Dr. Joseph Pizzorno?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Pizzorno, what books did he write?
I'm looking at I send a link in the chat room, and
oh, you know what? It might be like the Encyclopedia of. Yeah, see if he's got a title called the Encyclopedia of something.
Let me look it up. It's another podcast of somebody, The Power of Genetics. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm trying to refrain from opening windows because sometimes it messes with
Yes, I'll look it up.
bandwidth.
that's the name I'm seeing. The
Encyclopedia
book.
of Natural Medicine. Michael Murray, I don't know why I can't remember his name. Michael Murray and Joseph Pizzorno. The Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine. And so, and I'm glad you are so attentive to detail to bring this up. This single book, and realize, I'm talking to our listeners right now, realize that I had to wait 20 years of knowing about pseudohypoxia, not having the first damn clue on how to fix it, but I knew it was out there, I knew it was my answer, and 20 years later, boom, it was dropped in my lap.
Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine?
Yep.
That's the one? Yes.
That was it.
Oh, currently unavailable, of course, on
Of course it is.
Amazon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And see, here's the other thing. I've been preaching this since 2008 when I was doing radio shows on RBN with Rebecca Carley. I came across I make up my own memes and maxims. Memory is a survival trait. If you're being abused and you can't remember that you've been abused, then you will be abused again because they will take advantage of that. So what I'm saying is, one time, 20 years ago, 20 years ago, my goodness. Let me do some math. So the last time I was there, 1994 minus 2022. This shows that I can't do math in my head. 28 years ago, I wrote a note on a piece of paper from his book.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten that note.
Well, is it a difference if it's a first edition and because I see available third edition?
Yeah.
So I wonder how would this be different from the first edition? It's just a reprint or?
And that always has fascinated me. There was a Black Magic's text, and it's like, I really wanted to know what it was because it was translated from the French. I wanted to know what changes there were because it said that it was severely edited from the original. It's like, okay, what did they take out once they realized they gave away too many secrets? Mm-hmm. And so I was not able to look at the original one and do a compare and contrast. And just, as a disclaimer, I study the dark arts. Why? Because that's where medicine came from. I do not practice them. And again, we're going to go back to Sun Tzu. He said, know yourself, know your enemy. Mm-hmm. And this is the absolute facts, this undeniable facts. Medicine arose from black magics. And so if you accept that, then you understand that they ain't here to help, man. They're here to mess you up.
Just to mention the book, it says there is a newer edition of this item, which is a textbook of natural medicine. It's going to cost you $210. It's a 2-volume set and only 6 left. Order soon. So it looks like this is more for the medical field. It's not, because it's a textbook. It's not an encyclopedia. What difference does it make?
Let's do it this way. I live in Illinois, and Illinois has a really unique situation where if you are a resident, then you can get a courtesy card to any university that is a land grant institution. And of course, the U of I, really big name in schools, it is set up that way. And I spent 3 years in their library system. And within any library system, sometimes you can get books, you can borrow books through your local library, even if it's an independent library. As long as it's part of the library system, you can borrow books from other libraries. And so if anybody wanted, how much was it? Like $200?
Yes, $210.
Yeah, if you want to save $210, go to the library and see if they got it on the shelf or if they can do like an interlibrary loan. Mm-hmm. Because, I'm telling you, the highlight of that book, that's about all I got out of the encyclopedia. Is like, I can picture it in my mind's eye. It was so poignant to me. It's like, oh my God, in words, I finally got a description for what's wrong with me. I didn't get any answers, but I understood the chemistry of it, and I wrote it down. I can remember handwriting this paragraph out because, back in those days, I couldn't even afford photocopies. And that's about all I'm saying that I got out of that book.
So don't be spending $210 just because I made a single citation.
Yeah, and it's a 2022 print, this particular one.
And here's the other thing, I encourage everybody to get on the Peter D'Adamo blood type diet. And I get nothing but resistance from people that are type A. No offense intended. It's just the way that it is. People with type A are the most resistant to changing their diet. And I found extreme benefit in his book. I think I always have it at my feet as a reference. I think it's 1996. Yep, 96. And he co-wrote it with a nutritionist, and it was really well done, except for a couple things I can mention later. But he really went off the rails in his next edition. And so I tell people, go to a used bookstore or a flea market or something and get the 1996 first edition, because it just seems that over time, the original material, the primal material is always best, and then something goes wrong in the next editions. So if you were going to get the encyclopedia, do you know when the first edition was published of the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine?
I am looking at actually right now. Hold on. It looks like 1990.
90. See, my last year in college was 94. And so that would be in perfect, harmonization. If anybody was to get one, I would say get the first edition, because you have no idea what they changed.
Correct. Now I wonder if what was changed was the similar issue I have gotten with aromatherapy book, which I was supposed to study. The first edition was about 200 pages. The second edition was revised edition, not the second. The revised edition was over 300 pages, I believe. Whoa. And when I submitted my paperwork, my study, they said I had a comments because certain questions were not, answers for the questions were not in the book I was studying. And then we found out that I was studying the revised edition while the school had the first edition. Now, the reason for the revised edition was one of the few things that I caught, in a book was if you use essential oils and you can diffuse them in water, you can diffuse them in a device similar to, but you don't use waterless diffuser, and you can also put a drop on a light bulb, hot, on the lamp, right? So, and there was a caution, put only one. Well, if you don't have a good sense of smell, and you put one drop of essential oil, and it's oil, it's a flammable substance. Right. So if you have a bad sense of smell and you don't smell anything, you put 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 drops, you're causing a fire. So yeah. I think and I have not found that section in revised edition, because my assumption would be, people found a problem, they were following the book and they had fires in the house and they complained, right? Rightfully so. That was my first thought. Why would you put essential oil on a light bulb? And I learned the hard way when I was in Slovakia and I was in the sauna, and I brought my own essential oil, and I put essential oil on hot stone, and oh yes, we had a little what do you call ambiance in the sauna.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
Yes, but what could you do? Just let it burn. That's all. So it burned off of the stone, and it was not like it was unsafe. It was just it surprised me, and of course dumb. It's a flammable substance.
Yeah.
So that must have been a reason for it to be removed from the revised edition, and there were some other things that they have also found through research, because they were quoting newest research.
Sure.
So the update is good. if it's founded in a research and evidence. And even that you have to double check and check what, who did this research. Was it intentional, meaning pushing certain products by a certain company, or was it actual new founding and they're sharing the information? Because you have to question everything. So
they lied to us about everything, every single thing. And so we have no foundation except what we make for ourselves. And once you find that firm foundation, then you can build on it. But pretty much nobody has dug down deep enough to the bedrock, and they start putting blocks on sand, and all of a sudden their construction is leaning to one side.
Unless you want the construction to be leaning to one side.
It's an artistic statement.
So there you go. You can massage it any which way you want to fit your idea or to fit your motives or end result. So are we still at the B1, right?
Well, and what I typically do is I feed off of other people's direction and goals and input. Is there anything else that we could talk about, B1? You tell me, and then if anything comes to mind, because I wing this stuff anymore. I used to come prepared with entire books of notes, and now I'm just pulling it out of my head. So
which is pretty good.
Around in my head.
Which is pretty impressive, actually. Now I think we've covered everything related to B1. What forms there are, what are the signs of deficiencies. The different products, what you should be looking for, what you should be looking for it to have and not have. Also,
can I address one thing? I don't want to forget.
No, go ahead.
We were talking during the vitamin A thing about compartmentalization. I think that was you and me, because I'm talking to so many people now, I forget who I said this to. If you were to do a blood test, let's say, oh yeah, doc, I want to find out what my thiamine status is. It only checks the blood.
Yes.
And I think we did talk about compartmentalization. So your blood is just a representation of your blood. You don't know what the B status is in your liver, and as far as I remember, there just tiny amounts of B1, because your liver is a B vitamin storage facility. But B1 is transient. You might have a little bit that's retained there, but pretty much you use it and you lose it. And so even if you checked your blood, you wouldn't know what was in your liver, you wouldn't know what was in your cells. And so from my point of view, save your money. And you don't have to trust me, but when you look at the bulk of the, what do I want to say, the media out there that's talking about B1 deficiency, thiamine deficiency, I think everybody has beriberi. So just operate from that point of view. And because we do excrete it, use it or lose it, there's, from my mind, and I'm not a doctor, I can't make pronouncements, but from my mind, there should be no downside to taking B1.
Yeah, and we're not talking about suggestions of what people should and shouldn't take. We're just giving them an option and information. The one thing that we didn't mention is that the metabolics mentions over here that vitamin B is water soluble. And so the body does not store it, and the depletion can occur within 14 days.
Oh, 14 days. That's longer than I thought. And see, let's talk about this, because, it's not just talking about B, but we got to talk about this entire, like the infrastructure of alternative medicine. I'm sorry, I got one of those pop-up messages on my computer, and it just completely flashed my mind. And so here's my, and by the time we get to vitamin C, I'll rehash this concern of mine. But since we brought it up with the benfotiamine, it's fat soluble. Now, I understand the reason behind how a molecule can either be or be made to be miscible in fat, meaning it just like flows right into it. But from time immemorial, B vitamins have always been water soluble. Vitamin C has always been water soluble. And then all of a sudden there's this movement because, and this is what I'm saying, our cells have been so damaged that what used to just flow right in through the cell surface is impeded because of that damage. And so they go, oh yeah, the vitamin C ain't doing its old magic anymore. Let's help it out. Mm-hmm. Let's turn it into a lipid nanoparticle.
Isn't it about tricking body to do something that was not designed to do?
From the beginning of nature, vitamin C has been water soluble, and it's like, but you can't get it into the cell anymore, so let's fake our way in. Let's trick our way in. Let's put it in the thing. And this is what set me off, because when I first started writing ICD 999, there was so many trickle-overs of topics that I couldn't put it all in one book. So it literally became the Rise and Fall Kingdom Plantae and the Rise and Fall Kingdom Animalia to get all the stuff that couldn't go into the first book. So it's like one book followed the next. And what we're seeing is that when you make vaccines, this is well before this COVID nonsense, lipid nanoparticles was the go-to thing to trick a vaccine into the body. And so I'm seeing this technology of, it was just like a lateral transfer. What they use to trick vaccines into the body is the same thing they're using to trick vitamin C into the body, but it's a trick. Well, tricks are for kids. Where's that rabbit and what cereal prize do I get? Why are you trying to trick the body? Well, the body's damaged. And then sometimes the whole lipid nanopart, the lipid, they're called lipid nanoparticles. That doesn't work. And so they literally nanize the substance itself. Well, if you know anything about nanotechnology, I think Berkeley, California, is the only municipality in all of North America that actually set up laws, because Berkeley has the college there. They set up laws to regulate nano manufacturing, because the human body has no handling pathways for molecules of that size, which means if you inhale them, if you get them in your bloodstream, if you ingest them, they can go throughout the body and go wherever they want. And I keep talking about just vitamins alone building up and becoming toxins. Well, imagine a nanoparticle that has no ability to be prevented from coming into a cell and no way to get it out of the cell once it comes in. And then, they're saying, well, use our new vitamin C that's been nanized, and we put it in, it's a liposomal form. And it's like, never in the history of mankind has that ever happened. And so people have told me, oh, yeah, I had wonderful results with it. Other people say, yeah, I took it and nothing happened. But where's our 30-year study to see if it's even safe?
Correct.
And I'll tell you where the study is.
You are the study.
You're the guinea pig.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm sorry, I can't recommend stuff like that. I won't take the risks myself. And so I always bring things like that up so that people have. And this is why it's called informed consent. You are now informed, and you can make a decision for yourself based on the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story that I just gave you.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to testing, and people can do, let's say, specific, and I'm jumping over here, but it relates to B1. Test for B12. You take a methylmalonic acid test and holotranscobalamin test on the same blood draw. And the reason is one is measuring the absorption of the vitamin B12, and the other one measures the levels of B12 in your body. Am I correct?
Well, see, that I love, you've got an excellent memory, and you're asking all the absolutely pertinent questions. And so what happens with B12 is they will do just a baseline serum B12 test, and it is absolutely useless. Absolutely useless. Number one, because the reference range means nothing. Number two, because they're only checking one compartment. And then, and you're bringing up an excellent point. These are the only tests I know that can check how much is actually being used by the body. So if you take the initial B12 test, the serum B12, and then you do, is it methylmalonic acid?
Yes, MMA and transcobalamin, but I'm not sure which one is for levels and which one is for absorption. Don't remember that.
Exactly. Well, I think the MMA might be a urine test, so it would show how much you're excreting. And then the halocobalamin, I'm doing all this stuff from memory. That one would be the actual use in the tissues. And so that is one time when you can actually go into the body and find out where it is and what it's doing.
I remember I was taking a blood work for B12, and I requested both. There was no urine collection.
Okay.
Now,
okay, the MMA was used for both.
Okay, so that's question with the testing. And question number 2 is, what will be the issue taking B complex as opposed to single B vitamin separate?
Okay, and see, we need to go there because people always ask, well, what do you do? And after all these years, I came up with a system based on, I've got a clinical laboratory background. And so I understand science, I understand process. And if you were to take, let's say for the sake of argument, the story that I told, I was taking one vitamin and I got rid of a disease that I had for 20 years. Prior to that, I was taking, it's called metabolic maintenance. They had phosphorylated B complex. Now the thing about it is the B6 and the B2 were phosphorylated. Nothing else was. The B1, the thiamine, was not. And I was taking that, and I had pretty good results, helping me against farm chemicals. But it didn't do anything for my brain damage. So if I continued to take those, I would never have gotten the gains of healing my cerebral salt wasting syndrome. Then I went to a single vitamin. I was looking for, it's almost like a Three Stooges or cartoon skit. I was looking over the fence looking, okay, when am I going to gain weight? And it's like, I didn't gain any weight. Oh, look, I'm not eating salt anymore. It's one of those sneak up on you things. And you realize that, and this is the other new age stuff. Well, you have to visualize it. You have to think positively and expect a certain result, and then you get it. That's what would you call that? That's it's magical thinking. I was not expecting the result that I got, and it snuck up on me, and it gave me like the shock of my life. And that's in a good way. But if I had not been taking a single vitamin at one time, I would not have known that relationship. And so what I did is I moved from taking complexes to taking only single vitamins in foil packets. And the reason is it's multifold, because if you take one thing, and like I was dosing with vitamin B2, that's riboflavin 5-phosphate, and it made me puke. I mean, horrific illness just from taking the standardized dose on the label, and I was just puking. And it's like, like I said, I'm a mad scientist. I got clinical background. It's like, well, that shouldn't have happened. So after I recovered the next day, I go, well, let's see if it was the B2. So I took it again, and I spent the next day puking my guts out. And so what I'm saying is, because of my makeup, whatever was going on, I was able to isolate it was the B2 and not like a B complex. it was the B1 and not a B complex. And then if you wanted to adjust the dose, then you can adjust the dose when you got them in foil bags that are sealable. And I'm saying that because it keeps them out of the sunlight. It keeps them dry because moisture and oxygen are the enemy of vitamins. But if that is the case, if you're loading up and it's very permeable, the cellulose capsules, you might as well just have them sitting out in air. They're just like, they're in one spot in a capsule, but the air is just like going in and out of these things all day long. So you know that they're oxidizing the longer that they're sitting. And so I use foil bags, one vitamin at a time, for dosing and to know whether it's good, bad, or ugly.
Correct. Now, when you mentioned metabolic maintenance, B complex, was it phosphorylated?
Yes.
Just to refresh your memory, the very first ingredient in a capsule is vitamin C, as ascorbyl palmitate.
Right.
The second one was thiamine mononitrate.
Mononitrate, the one that I said don't take. Go ahead.
Yes, riboflavin, 5-phosphate, niacin as niacinamide, B6 as pyridoxine hydrochloric acid and pyridoxal 5-phosphate.
Right, both.
Yep. Folate as L5 methylfolate glucosamine salt. B12.
Thank you, Merck. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
what is it?
Thank you, Merck.
B12 as methylcobalamin. Biotin, pantothenic acid as calcium panthenate. Choline as choline bitartrate. Bititrate. Inositol, PABA, which is para-aminobenzoic acid, and that's it.
Okay, we'll talk about PABA much later. But let me just say that choline, eating a vegan diet, because see, I don't identify as what I do. I eat a vegan diet, I'm not a vegan. And so knowing that and looking for like fertilizers that fit the vegan, should we call it the honor code? There is only one fertilizer in all of the internet that is listed as vegan. And so when people are growing their crops, it's like, oh, look, blood and bone meal. Yeah, it's considered organic. It's actually toxic prion distributing waste that nobody should be exposed to, but it's organic. There's only one vegan fertilizer out there. And when I was doing the search, I accidentally tripped across a reference to choline, that there's two sources of it. One is ground up cow brain, and the other one is laboratory synthesis. And since, I worked in the lab, I understand chemistry. There's certain things that are innocuous. Not everything is like, a horrific, demonic petroleum distillate that you need to avoid. It's called synthesis in the lab. You take starter chemicals and you make a bigger chemical with a process. And so choline can either be synthetic or from ground up cow brains. And since I'm like anti-prion, it's like, I think I'll call, and I think I did call metabolic maintenance. And I said, where does your choline come from? And if you understand how these businesses are set up, they're a seller, they're a distributor. They don't make this crap.
Correct.
If at any level they do make it, it's like in their factory and they've got like capsule fillers, but they get all their raw materials from vendors, and they literally took 1 month to call their vendor and find out what the source of the choline was.
Which
and
was?
Fortunately came back that it was synthetic. And see, this is what discourages people, and I've said it for years, and people are starting to say it now. You have to literally be a pharmacist in order to know what to eat or what supplement to take. And beyond that, you got to be like a forensic detective to know, okay, am I eating prions into myself by eating something that was made from cow brains or what?
And that's why we have you and Red Hens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So today's dissection of B1 was very fruitful. It was we are at 1 hour and 41 minutes already.
Oh my goodness.
I know, I know. It's a long one, but it's a very. I mean, this can be put in the volumes. Just talking about vitamin. We are at the second vitamin and first of it.
I promise to get you that list. I'm sorry I stalled at the beginning of the show. I'm writing myself get list of all B vitamins. And people will be shocked to know how many are out there.
Well, that was the last one, B17. That's the one that comes from the apricot kernels.
Yeah,
and they say it's
amygdalin.
Yeah, they say it's anti-cancerous, yet it contains arsenic, high levels.
Oh, cyanide.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
It really doesn't contain cyanide. It has hydrocyanic acid in there.
Okay.
And once it hits your stomach, then it liberates the cyanide.
Okay.
But see, this is the other thing. You know, if you don't want to shut the show down like too quickly, let me just say that of the B. Oh, and that's because this is the last thing that I wanted to cover, because my mind always has to get that last thread. You had read the metabolic maintenance. And that's different from the metabolics company. Correct. That is in the UK. Mm-hmm. Metabolic maintenance, and they offered B12 as methylcobalamin. And because your question is, you know, should we be taking B1 as part of a complex? Well, obviously not, because they're using thiamine mononitrate. Mm-hmm. And then they also had, and there's no choice there, they had methylcobalamin mm-hmm. as the B12. Well, cyanocobalamin is basically toxic waste. Mm-hmm. If people are afraid of cyanide, then, well, what do you have to do? In order to use the cobalamin, you got to detox the cyanide, because it's of no value to the body. And they're shooting cyanocobalamin into people all day as a B12 booster, especially for old folks.
Oh, so that's the form? I thought it was a methylcobalamin form.
And it might change if you're like an alternative practitioner, but I've been in medical facilities, and you can see on the label it's cyanocobalamin. So that's the way it was in the old days. I haven't been into a hospital in probably 12 years. So things might have changed. I don't know. But mm-hmm. Let's get back to the methyl. Okay. The methyl form is okay if you can methylate. Mm-hmm. You see, we opened this talk with people like myself that can't phosphorylate. If you can't methylate, then, well, yeah, that might be good. The methylcobalamin might be good because it'll be a methyl donor if you can't methylate. But if you are an over-methylator, so you can be under, you can be normal, or you can be over. If you're an over-methylator and it's donating methyl groups, especially for like autistic kids, and of course now we have to say autistic adults, it can be devastating, absolutely harmful. So if you're an over-methylator, the methylcobalamin is not the guru's choice. But why do they choose it? Because 80% of the population will respond positively to it, which means that they're pandering. They're pimps. They're pandering to their base. So if 80% of the population is buying it, 80% of the population is getting benefit from it, they're only pandering to them. So when I started a vegan diet, I was aware that B12 will be deficient. And so at first I was using hydroxycobalamin. I thought I was doing the right thing. And then you find out about methylcobalamin. So I was using that. And then I was using a mix. And then there was a time, because I was the second story man on the farm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, get up on that bin. The bin's like, taller than a house. Get up on that bin and close the lid. So you run up the ladder, sprint up the top of the bin roof, and you'd go close the bin roof, and you'd come sliding down, and you'd come down the ladder. There was a time when I couldn't even climb a ladder anymore. And it's not machismo. I'm trying to paint a picture of, I have never been afraid of anything in my life, and I couldn't even climb a ladder. I knew that something was seriously wrong, but I didn't know what. And then I realized, well, if I can't phosphorylate, if I'm taking the inactive form of B12, which is hydroxycobalamin and methylcobalamin, then I can't, it's called adenosylation. If I can't adenosylate the same way that I can't phosphorylate, I have just spent my entire time, my adult life, taking supplements that did absolutely nothing and left me with a demyelinated brainstem because I'd lost my sense of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took, I think it was 10 times the oral therapeutic dose every day for a month before I could climb a ladder. And so I followed the best advice of gurus. And this is why I like what we're doing. Nobody has to believe me. And I hate that phrase, do your own research. But guess what? I did my own research on myself and I failed. I listened to gurus, I took their advice, I took their supplements, and they failed me because I could not activate the B12 and it seriously damaged my body. So I did my own research. I experimented on myself like an animal, and now I'm able to, with absolute certainty, tell people, oh hell, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to take B12 and you don't even know whether you're over-methylator and under-methylator, or you can actually put on an adenosyl molecule onto the cobalamin, just go right to the adenosyl cobalamin and just skip all those steps. Don't do what I did, because I hurt myself.
Yeah. And just to answer a question related to injections of B12, yes, there is a cyanocobalamin, that's the most common one, but they also have hydroxycobalamin that is being injected. So they have two types of vitamin B12 in injections.
Two types of useless B12 for injection.
There you go.
And oh, by the way, don't forget the preservative.
Mm.
And so if they put in preservative with an injection, how is that any different from a vaccine?
Mm.
So then your body sees these proteins coming in, and proteins are allergenic.
Yes.
And it sees, oh, look at, there's an irritant, the preservative, and there's this protein that, wow, it didn't come in through normal channels. I think I'll mount an immune response to it. And so now all of a sudden they've induced autoimmunity to native cobalamin.
Yeah.
And what that does is that makes a patient for life.
Correct.
Now you have to go back for the injections because your body is taking out any B12 that might have made its way into your system.
Mm.
This is why I hate alternative medicine.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, that was a happy thought, and we'll close there.
Well, say it like it is, and there is no debate.
Yeah.
So,
and, well, let's just have a happy thought. Take your B1.
all right. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to discuss B12. It looks like B12 won't be that much of a talk. What do you think?
Well, we got let's see, we got 10 more in between, so it'll be a while before we get there.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, let's not skip. I actually like what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go through them one at a time.
Yeah.
And can I give you a preview?
Go ahead.
That vitamin C is not ascorbic acid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ascorbic acid is part of the vitamin C complex.
Okay.
And so that might be a long show in itself.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're going to have fun.
And
I'll be ready with you for lists next time.
Okay, and then when we stop with vitamins, we're going to delve into elements of the periodic table. We're going to take them all and just to let you know.
Okay, I got my chart.
Get ready.
I want to see how many months that will be. Let's see. If we skip all of the transuranic elements, we will go to 92.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can break it down to essential, non-essential. We can break it down to harmful, stay away from, and then we're gonna compile one of the poisonous Like,
Oh, I like the way that you're doing that. Yeah, it's like these are the bad snakes, these are the good snakes. Yeah,
and these are good or bad depending on how you use them.
yeah. By which end you pick them up from?
Yeah, because the poison is in a dose. A simple.
Oh, man, you are a poetess. Yeah.
No, I'll learn from the best.
Oh, really? Introduce me.
The stick man. The Patrick Jordan BSP, brain the size of a planet.
Oh, man, doesn't it feel like it? Oh, the weight of the world.
Yeah, if anybody's still there listening to this, almost we are in a second hour almost.
Oh no!
Yes, yes. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully you didn't have to pause, run away, and come back. If anybody wants to look up Patrick's books, all you have to do is go to lulu.com, LULU.com, put his name, Patrick Jordan, or just type in ICD 999, again, ICD 999. You will find all his books, and every single one should be in everybody's library, at least for those who are interested in their health and life, and also animals, because as Patrick mentioned, he wrote a book, The Kingdom, The Kingdom of the Animalia?
Yep.
Rise and Fall of the Kingdom of Animalia. There you go. All right. Cheers, everybody. I'll see you in a week or the next recording.